These are some watering mistakes you need to fix in the garden. Watering with too much pressure. You don't need water pressure like this. Water pressure that is too strong is only going to compact the soil, and it could damage the root system of especially smaller plants and seedlings. You really should be using a soaker hose setting like this, or a low setting on your hose. Watering too fast. Watering my fig tree like this for a minute or so is worse than taking my hose and putting it to just a very small stream trickle, taking the hose and just setting it on the plant and leaving it there to water the plant for 5 or 10 minutes or so. Not only is this slow dripping of water a much better way to deeply penetrate the entire soil, it's going to ensure if you have problems with really hydrophobic soil that's repelling water, it's going to slowly rehydrate that soil from the inside out. Watering at the wrong time of day. The best time of day to water is in the early morning. This is ideal because you're going to find the coolest temperatures here when you're less likely to experience evaporation and water loss. If you water in the middle of the day when the sun is beating down on all of your plants in the soil, you're going to lose a lot of water to evaporation, and not as much of that water is going to seep down into the soil where it can be used and absorbed by your plant's roots. If you're watering in the evening or nighttime, that's an okay time to water, but what can happen is if you have plants that are susceptible to fungal diseases and you're getting water on the leaves of those plants, diseases could potentially fester overnight without being dried off of the leaves of the plant. When you water in the early morning, you get that nice, calm, soothing morning sun that's going to dry up that water from the leaves of those plants without being really harsh rays of sun. I have heard this pushed a lot, where if you get a drop of water on a leaf, it's going to act as a magnifying glass that's going to burn the leaves if there's any water on them. I personally haven't seen this ever happen on any of my plants, but maybe that's just because I'm watering them the right way. Not checking your soil. Before you even pick up the hose, what you want to do is pull back any of the mulch layer you have on top of your plants and check the soil moisture. You can stick a finger in a couple inches deep, and if it's dry and there's no moisture whatsoever, you definitely need to water. Now, if you stick your fingers down and it feels decently moist, especially for something like this drought-tolerant fig, you may not need to water. However, even with this drought-tolerant fig, I really need to understand what's going on in the soil. I know this fig tree specifically had a root ball that wasn't the biggest and most aggressive, and if I look at the soil here, it's still pretty dark and moist, and I don't really need to water this fig tree right now. But now this other fig tree, I know that this fig tree had a much larger root ball that had a lot of aggressive roots it was sending out, and looking down in here, I can see there's a thick mat of roots right here. I can't even get my finger through. That's the original root ball that I planted here. And then on the edge, the soil is just not as dark and moist, and I think I need to give it a water. The easiest way to do this is to take your hose, put it on a very low setting, just dripping like that, and then set it on the plant like this, and just leave it for 10 minutes or something. Go do something else. If you don't remember anything about watering, just remember these two words: low and slow. Watering your plants on a low setting very slowly is a great way to allow that water to seep into the entire root mass so the plant can efficiently use that water. Not mulching your plants. Mulch on plants for me is an essential. This is a part of my watering strategy. Mulch is going to act like a really nice blanket on top of plants. It's going to protect that soil from degradation from the sun. But the amazing thing that mulch is going to do is when the water hits the top of this mulch, it's slowly going to percolate down through the little fibers of the mulch and enter the soil. And the mulch will also help to prevent any fast watering mistakes you're making. If you're watering the top of this mulch really hard, it's going to do a really good job at capturing that water and dispersing it throughout your soil. So even if you are making those mistakes, this acts as a backstop. Overwatering. This correlates a lot to checking your soil, but also just knowing your plants. With these small seedlings, when they're first growing, before they've put on leaves or when they just have a few leaves on them, I know they're not gonna need a ton of water because they don't have big, strong root structures yet. And overwatering these seedlings when they're young like this could prevent them from reaching their full potential. This is a pawpaw tree here, and this is a peach tree. And plant roots do want water, obviously, but they also want oxygen. And that's something that a lot of people forget. And if there's too much saturation within that soil and those plant roots can't breathe, well, they're gonna have a hard time doing their best job. In a worst case scenario, they could get root rot and kill off portions of that root mass. I just pulled some soil out of that seedling and listen to this. There's plenty of water in there. I don't need to water that. Underwatering. With plants like these fig trees, they are drought tolerant, but when they're contained in these small spaces like this, once the root masses start to get close to envelop the entire pot, those root masses are gonna need a lot of water and a lot of nutrients to be able to sustain the life of this fig tree that, if planted in the ground, would normally be able to spread those root systems out over an expansive area. So with trees that you have in pots, especially these water and nutrient hungry fig trees, in the heat of summer, I could probably water these every other day and that wouldn't be over watering them. But again, that all just depends on how thick is my mulch layer, what does my soil look like below, and also what is the weather like outside. If it's a cloudy day but it's not raining, you may think, oh, my plants aren't getting water today, but those clouds are offering a really nice protective blanket in the atmosphere that's creating a lot of humidity, and that's preventing evaporation. So best just to check your plants in those conditions to see what the soil is like. Watering the leaves of a plant. Plants that are especially susceptible to fungal diseases like tomatoes, you do not want to do overhead watering from the leaves down. Ideally, you want to water at the level of the soil, because if water sits on the leaves of certain varieties of plants for too long, it can create some of those diseases. It's a super inefficient form of watering. If you water from the top down, you're going to lose a lot of that water to evaporation. Now, I think I've hinted at it throughout this video, but I think the worst mistake that gardeners make with watering is using a one-size-fits-all approach to watering, because a plant like this fig tree right here and these seedlings right here, they have much different watering requirements based on what the soil is doing, how big the root structure is, how much mulch is on top, what variety the plant is, how old the plant is, what the root mass is doing in the pot. And that may all sound like a lot to think about, but it's as simple as just checking your soil, looking at the moisture level, then you don't have to think about anything else. This can take time and experience to really get a good feel for what the ideal moisture level is for each plant, and that's okay. Time and experience are the best teachers, even better than anything that I am saying here today. If you go out and you have a plant that's struggling and you see the leaves are kind of drooping and you check the soil, well, then you're really going to understand in a great way what the conditions of an underwatered plant look like. And if you go out and see a plant that has some leaves starting from the base of the plant first that are starting to yellow and then eventually brown a little bit, and you check the moisture level in the soil and it's sopping wet and it's dripping, well, then you'll get a really good feel for what an overwatered plant looks like. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned how to fix some of these common mistakes and maybe some that you hadn't even heard of yet. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon.